How do we measure good education? Is it according to how well someone speaks English or the number of European languages they can speak? When we think of classic and valuable literature, why is it that the first names that pop into our minds are Shakespeare, George Orwell, and Mark Twain? Now, this begs the question, where do we begin with decolonizing education? To help us answer those questions, I'm joined in studio by Terrence Ball, who's the publisher at the South African Lexicography Units, and Professor Mathole Motshekga, who's part of the ANC's Cultural and Affairs Committee. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Dr. Motshekga, let me start with you. When we talk about decolonizing education, what are we talking about essentially? What does that mean?
It means that people must be able to use their indigenous languages, because the indigenous language gives expression to what is in the soul of the people, and you can't translate the soul into something else. And also it involves the whole question of a worldview, and the worldview also is first and foremost a spiritual worldview before it becomes a material worldview. And now the concepts that are used to give expression to that spiritual worldview, when translated into another language, then gets distorted. Then you have a people with a distorted understanding of themselves, of the world, of the cosmology, and so on. Then the identity of the people is dented from the outset, and that's why you have a problem of identity crisis amongst African people, indigenous people, however educated they may be. They end up wanting to be measured in terms of how they pronounce English, and pronunciation has nothing to do with the content of their soul and their personalities.
Terrence, how important is the curriculum in changing or even beginning to rectify that? You guys have published a number of dictionaries in indigenous languages. So you've got Tswana, isiXhosa, Tsonga. Why did it take so long, firstly? I think maybe if we can start with a bit of background.
Yeah, well, we are substructures. The National Lexicography Units are substructures of PANSALB, the Pan-South African Language Board, and each of the units is housed in the area in which the language that they are working in predominates. So in Limpopo there are 3 units, in Mpumalanga there are 2 units, and then obviously isiZulu is in KwaZulu-Natal, isiXhosa in the Eastern Cape, and so on. The first focus of these units was to produce what we would refer to as definitive monolingual and bilingual, English bilingual dictionaries in each of those languages. And obviously that takes a long time. Remember that some of the units were started from scratch. The bigger languages like isiXhosa, isiZulu were part of academic projects that long preceded democracy. Whereas other languages like Ndebele, Chitsonga, etc., had no units at all. They were started from scratch. Obviously the curriculum is absolutely essential in terms of changing people's attitudes and views, but equally the understanding of language is key. And we live in a country where the vast majority of learners are studying in a language which is not their mother tongue. And that's why it's critical that we develop this resource to allow indigenous language speakers to learn sufficient English to make the transfer to English as the language of learning at grade 4, and obviously introduces non-indigenous language mother tongue speakers to an indigenous language.
Dr. Motshekga, Terrence touches on something very important in terms of you only have two languages that you learn in school in terms of our curriculum. English, or you can choose Afrikaans or isiZulu or Setswana. Given that we have 11 official languages, how feasible is it for us to introduce all the languages that we have into the curriculum?
It is very feasible because most of these languages are regional. If you are in Limpopo, for instance, you have Tshivenda, Chitsonga, Kilobedu, which is an upcoming language, Ndebele, which is upcoming. So if you go to KZN, you have isiZulu and a bit of Sotho. You go to Eastern Cape is, Xhosa, so it's possible. But it's just disappointing that people who do this important work like Professor Ball are virtually unknown and unseen, because these are the people who are supposed to have to be capacitated so that this work is speeded up.
And Terrence, that leads to my next question, just wanting to expand on what Dr. Motshekga has just said. How difficult a journey has this been? It makes you wonder if it's taken us 20 years to create dictionaries in native languages. How long will it take to put a textbook together that tells you about Tabayabusiu, or that tells you about the Lesotho and Oshaga and the likes?
You know, I think provided that you have the right people making contributions, it can be quicker to do that kind of book than a dictionary, because literally a dictionary starts with listing words that you know, sending them out to academics, a wide range of academics. Have any words been left out? Once you've got that list, defining those words, and then obviously sending them out again for review. So that's a very time-consuming process. And to produce textbooks, in my opinion, is less time-consuming, provided that you have the right people contributing to the
Why
project.
have we not produced them? Because we can't talk about decolonizing education if we don't talk about actually having textbooks that talk about African history.
Yeah, well, our focus really has been on language, because that's what the lexicography units do. They're language specialists. But we are talking to provincial and national departments of education, DBE, about the fact that we need to work together to make sure that these dictionaries are absolutely appropriate for the classrooms. And the Constitution, our mandate is to develop dictionaries and other material. We need to work with curriculum specialists to develop that material. So we are now actively contacting departments of education. And it's critical. I mean, you know, we've produced now a range of foundation phase dictionaries in all of our languages, because unfortunately a lot of young indigenous language mother tongue speakers don't see their languages as being relevant, which is a tragedy, and it's a perception that we have to change. And I think, I hope that by ensuring that children as young as grade R and grade 1 who see a dictionary in their mother tongue will realize that their mother tongue has value. It is important, and multilingualism is key in this country if we are to create a more cohesive society.
Right. Dr. Motshekga, what does it mean that after almost over 20 years, not even almost, after over 20 years, we still find ourselves in a situation where, in terms of our education system, we do not have those textbooks that talk about African history in order for us to know where we come from or where we're going? We don't know where we come from, but there's no reference.
I think it's largely neglect by ourselves as government, especially by an institution like PENSALP, because it has that mandate. And also you have a generation of people who believes that to be educated means to be proficient in English. And then we have to decolonize the minds of the educators. We have to decolonize the minds of society. You know, the middle class today, they speak to their children in English, and they think that that is advancement. And therefore, the grandmothers who can speak English cannot pass indigenous knowledge to their children, and therefore there's a communication breakdown before grandchildren and grandparents, and a lot of knowledge is lost. So this is a serious matter. It's like a national suicide. So that's why my view is that a unit like his has got to be supported, and then they have to be capacitated. They shouldn't take another 20 years to produce the good work that they have produced.
Dr. Bell, we do thank you very much for the work that you and the team are doing. I think this is absolutely critical. Thank you very much for the work you're doing. Dr. Motshekga, always a great pleasure to have you in studio talking to us. And this is a discussion that we will be continuing to have throughout the year. I'm sure we'll bring you back to get more updates on the amazing work that you continue to do. That was Terrence Ball and Professor Mathole